Wednesday evening, nothing planned. You buy a lottery ticket the way you always do without really believing it will ever matter. You check the numbers the way you always do, halfway paying attention, expecting nothing. And then the numbers match. All of them. $500 million. Most people think winning the lottery is the end of all problems. The research says something completely different. And what actually happens to lottery winners, the real version, will change how you think about money, luck, and what you actually want from your life. The first thing that happens after the numbers match is not joy. It is something closer to disbelief, a complete inability of the brain to process information that falls so far outside anything it has been prepared for. You check the ticket 3 times. You check the website twice. You call the lottery line and listen to the automated confirmation and still do not fully believe it. The brain has no template for this. It keeps reaching for a more ordinary explanation and finding none. The first call most lottery winners make is to someone they love. Not to a financial advisor, not to a lawyer, to a person. Because the first thing that winning $500 million requires is a witness. Someone who makes it real by also believing it. But the second call made before you tell another soul should be to a lawyer. This is the most important piece of advice that lottery winners who survive their windfalls consistently give. Before you tell your parents, before you tell your best friend, before you post a single word anywhere online, you call a lawyer and you ask them how to protect yourself from what is about to happen. Because what is about to happen, the requests, the attention, the people who will materialize from your past, the decisions that must be made quickly about things you have never thought about, requires professional guidance more urgently than anything else. By the time the first 24 hours have passed, you have done the following: confirmed the win officially, spoken to a lawyer, begun the process of setting up an anonymous trust, if your state allows it, and paid off your parents' mortgage. In that order, deliberately. Because the structure you build in the first 24 hours determines the structure of everything that follows. And the people who skip the structure in favor of the celebration are the ones who appear in the cautionary statistics 5 years later. Here is what $500 million actually changes. And here is what it does not. It removes financial constraint entirely. Every decision you have ever made, partly because of money, where to live, what work to take, what to eat, what to drive, where to travel, is now a pure preference rather than a compromise. This sounds simple. It is not. Removing financial constraint from decisions does not make the decisions easier. It makes them harder. Because when money is not the limiting factor, you are forced to confront what you actually want. And most people have spent so long making decisions within financial constraints that they have no clear idea what they would choose if cost were irrelevant. It changes how people treat you. Not always in the ways you would expect. Some people become warmer drawn to the money even when they do not consciously know it. Others become more distant, uncomfortable with the gap that has opened between your circumstances and theirs. The people who treat you exactly the same as they always did, those people become immediately and obviously the most important people in your life. You know who they are within the first month. They are the ones worth keeping. It does not change what makes you laugh. It does not change the music that moves you. It does not change what you find boring or fascinating, what makes you feel alive or empty. The $500 million lands on top of you, it does not reach inside and rearrange who you are. Whoever you were on the Wednesday before the numbers matched is who you are on the Thursday after. Richer, yes, but fundamentally the same person, facing the same internal questions, just with the financial pressure removed from them. That is the surprise that almost no lottery winner is prepared for. The surprise is not the money. The surprise is how much of themselves is still there, unchanged, on the other side of it. The research on lottery winners is more complicated than most people expect. Studies consistently show that within 2 to 3 years of a major windfall, most winners report happiness levels that have returned to roughly where they were before the win. not because they are ungrateful. Because human beings adapt, we are extraordinarily good at adapting to new circumstances, including extraordinarily good ones. The penthouse that felt miraculous in month 1 feels like home in month 12. The car that felt impossible to own in year 1 is just the car in year 2. The brain adjusts. The baseline shifts. And the happiness that was supposed to be permanent turns out to be temporary, not because the money is gone, but because the brain has absorbed it. This is called hedonic adaptation, and it is the reason that buying things, however extraordinary, is the least effective use of a lottery win. Things adapt. Experiences fade into memory. But giving watching money become something real in the world, watching it fund a hospital wing or a scholarship or a community project that does not adapt in the same way. The impact continues after the initial experience, and that continuity of impact is what creates a continuity of satisfaction that things cannot replicate. The lottery winners who report genuine long-term happiness share 3 characteristics. First, they invested the majority, rather than spending it living on the income rather than the principal. Second, they maintained productive engagement with something that mattered to them, not necessarily work for money, but work for purpose. Third, they gave a significant portion away not because they felt obligated, but because giving turned out to be the most reliably satisfying thing they could do with the money. The lottery winners who ended up in the cautionary statistics did the opposite of all 3. They spent the principal. They stopped engaging with anything purposeful. They gave reluctantly, if at all. And within 5 years, many of them had lost both the money and the sense of self that had sustained them before the win. After taxes, $500 million becomes roughly $250 million in most jurisdictions. $250 million invested conservatively at 6% annual return generates $15 million per year. That is $1,250,000 per month in perpetuity without touching the principal. You could live on this for 100 lifetimes. The money, properly managed, never runs out. It simply keeps generating. The allocation that works that the wealth managers and the lottery advisors and the research all point to look something like this. Roughly 60% into diversified long-term investments, index funds, bonds, real estate, generating the passive income that sustains everything else. Roughly 20% into a charitable foundation giving it structure and permanence, making sure the giving continues even when the initial impulse fades. Roughly 10% for family structured carefully so that it helps without creating dependency. And the remaining 10% for personal spending experiences, property, the things that make daily life genuinely better rather than just visibly more expensive. 10% of $250 million is $25 million for personal spending, which is, by any measure, enough. More than enough. And by keeping personal spending at 10% rather than consuming the entire windfall, the other 90% continues to work, generating income, funding, giving, building the family's future indefinitely. The people who lose lottery winnings almost always make the same mistake. They treat the entire sum as spending money. $250 million spent rather than invested is gone within 10 years, sometimes much faster. The people who keep it treat the sum as a generator, not a pile. They live on what it generates. They do not consume it, and it keeps generating indefinitely for every generation that comes after them. Five years after the Wednesday when the numbers matched, here is what the life actually looks like. The fortune is largely intact because it was invested rather than spent. The passive income covers everything comfortably with enormous surplus that continues to be invested and given away. The charitable foundation has funded real things in the world, a hospital wing where patients recover, a scholarship program where students are studying things they could not have studied without it, a community project that changed the physical landscape of a neighborhood. The relationships that were real before the win are still real. The relationships that were conditional have long since fallen away, not dramatically, just gradually, as people who were drawn to the circumstance rather than the person found other circumstances to be drawn to. The social world is smaller than before the win and significantly more honest. And on Wednesday evenings, a lottery ticket is still bought. Not because $250 million needs to be supplemented, but because the 2 minutes between buying the ticket and checking the numbers, those 2 minutes of pure imagining, turn out to be one of the most pleasurable 2 minutes of the week. The dream, it turns out, is worth $2 regardless of whether it pays out. Here is the question that the lottery, in all its randomness, in all its absurdity, forces you to answer. Not, what would you buy? Anyone can answer that. The real question is, what would you build? What would you give? Who would you become if money stopped being the reason for any of your decisions? That question does not require a winning ticket. It is available to anyone willing to take it seriously. What would your answer be?